Yeah, good day, everyone. Today I'm going to present my reading response from a book chapter, Method in Women's Studies in Religion, a critical feminist hermeneutic and rhetoric in a book Transforming Vision Explorations in Feminist Theology, written by Elisabeth Schüssler, Fiorenza. The first, Fiorenza distinguishes feminist interpretation from hermeneutics in general. First, feminist studies in religion are not just hermeneutical, but also rhetorical critical studies. As a practice of rhetorical inquiry, feminist interpretation forms a critical, historical, and religious consciousness. Second, the starting point and interests of feminist hermeneutics differ from mainstream hermeneutics because they are not concerned with understanding, appreciating, and validating cultural and religious traditions, but with undertaking critical research that explores the history of women's subordination and exclusion. Feminist hermeneutics consists of two important elements. First, they explicitly stress women's agency and authority as intellectual religious subjects. Second, they seek not just to understand, but to change and transform women's situation of religious theological silencing, marginalization, and oppression. Fiorenza defines the objectives of feminist hermeneutics in three ways. The first is to understand and interpret social and natural realities qualitatively. The second is to control such realities. And the third is to transform realities, individual and collective consciousness to maximize the human potential for freedom and equality. To attain the goal of total liberation and equality, women must first come to realize their social position in the oppressive system of society. Therefore, feminist interpretation leads to the process of conscientization, which makes one realize that common cultural sense, dominant perspectives, scientific theories, and historical knowledge are not only androcentric, but also kyriocentric, that is, elite male or master-centered. Mainstream language and science do not give an objective, value-neutral account of reality, but rather make marginalization and stereotypes appear as natural or common sense. They interpret, construct, and legitimize reality from the elite Western male perspective and in the interest of relations and exclusion and domination. Hierarchy, according to Fiorenza, perpetrates not only dehumanizing sexism and gender stereotypes, but also other forms of women's oppression, such as racism, poverty, religious exclusion, and colonialism. Feminist hermeneutics, therefore, aim to fundamentally alter the nature of knowledge of the world by exposing its deformation and limitation in and through androcentrism, racism, classism, and cultural imperialism, as well as by reconstructing more comprehensive and adequate accounts of the world. Scripture and tradition in feminist hermeneutics. Feminist hermeneutics of liberation seeks to reclaim scriptures and tradition as an open-ended paradigm that makes transformation possible. Feminist hermeneutics is intended to identify and mark both the religious texts and tradition that promote hierarchical structure and their context in ideological function in ever-changing situations. Feminist hermeneutics use scripture and tradition as formative prototypes that must be deconstructed and reconstructed in terms of a global praxis for the liberation of all those dehumanized by hierarchical societies and religions. Methods of feminist hermeneutics. Fiorenza rejects traditional interpretation, which typically works in a hermeneutical circle or spirals, as they do not sufficiently consider domination and power relations. Instead, they must draw on and braid together several methodological approaches to reconfigure them as critical feminist rhetoric of liberation. Fiorenza develops the dance of interpretation with the following 7 hermeneutical interpretation strategies to constitute such a critical rhetorical model. They are hermeneutics of experience, analytics of domination, suspicion, critical evaluation, imagination, memory, and reconstruction, which reach its goal in the hermeneutics of transformation. Feminist hermeneutics of metic. Fiorenza lays a different foundation for her feminist hermeneutics. For her, it is not the myth of Hermes, but that of Metis and Athena that articulates the task of critical feminist rhetoric. Metis is the mother of Athena. She is the most wise woman among gods and humans. According to the myth, Zeus tricked Metis when she was pregnant with Athena because he feared that Metis would bear a child who would surpass him in wisdom and power. Therefore, he changed Metis into a fly and swallowed her so that he always has her with him and benefits from her wise counsel. This mythical story of Metis and Zeus reveals not only the father of God's fear that the child of wisdom will surpass him in knowledge, but also lays open to the conditions under which women in hierarchical cultures and religions can exercise wisdom and produce knowledge. Fiorenza contends that feminist hermeneutics intends to free Metis from the hierarchical power of Zeus. As religious subjects, women must claim their spiritual authority to assess the oppressive and liberating function of particular religious texts and tradition in specific historical situations. They do so because of hierarchical parts of authoritative religious claims that demand obedience and acceptance. Critical feminist discourses can deconstruct the all-encompassing hierarchical rhetoric and politics of subordination, generating new possibilities for the communicative construction of religious identities and emancipatory practices. As Fiorenza places hermeneutics in the frameworks of a critical feminist method, its task is not concerned with exploring the conditions and possibilities of understanding and appreciating Kyriocentric texts and traditions, but with critically assessing and dismantling their persuasive powers in the interest of women's liberation. To that end, one must construct a feminist theoretical framework of interpretation that can articulate critical rhetoric inquiry. Things I appreciate about Fiorenza's writing. In feminist hermeneutic, Fiorenza does not only engage with uncovering the meaning of the text, but also accentuates the importance of its praxis in social life. She shows that scriptural interpretation serves not only for congregational reflection or individual meditation, but also as an impetus for social activism. In her feminist interpretation, Fiorenza gives a fair account of many different structural factors that contribute to the relegation of women in society. She does not particularly condemn religious doctrine for causing the repression of women, but disperse it to other factors such as culture, race, socioeconomic background, and colonialism. Question. Does Fiorenza view culture and social structure in the Bible negatively, and does she think that They're inherently flawed and thus need to be reconstructed and in the contemporary context? If so, does it mean that her feminist hermeneutics require interpreters to bear, to some extent, certain negative presupposition on scriptures? The second question is it possible to derive inspiration from the Bible to empower the emancipation of women without viewing its narrative as accounts of a series of authoritarian and patriarchal oppression of women? And yeah, that's all from me, and have a good day. See ya.